Okay, let's discuss some of the queens of ancient Egypt. Not that they were even just an queen under a king, of course, but independent queens, where some of these may have uh, been because losing their husband and having a child, and that child is to be the king, and so she helps control everything in an interim, along with viziers and so on, until the child gets old enough, much like King Tut. Okay? But this time we're going to focus on one in the Wayback Machine. For this, what we're looking at here is a depiction of what some believe Nitocris looks like. And we'll talk about her description and her depiction here a little bit later. In this depiction, though, she's wearing a helmet that, if it was blue, would be very much like Nefertiti. And so we can see that ideal. In the picture here, you can see all these mounds of sand piled up onto pyramids. But if you look, these are those little pyramids. And in fact, yeah, it looks like them. There's a step pyramid in the background, two little ones, and a temple over there on the right, washed in the sun. So where is she looking at? Well, I'm thinking that she's looking at the Great Pyramid itself, or those three that are over there, and therefore she'd be standing out there in that front area where you see the smaller little pyramids. A lot of people just look over, and all those mastabas are there. And in fact, it's believed, yep, that's where she's buried, and perhaps in one of those pyramids, like the one right behind her head here. But there's a lot of things that were said about her, and so let's look into this. For what we're going to look into is the tales of Nitocris. And somebody brought this up a while back, and I didn't really feel like it was where I was going with everything, and why not now? Especially when an article shows up that talks about them and really can help me do what I was going to do and show what I was going to show. So let's talk about the shrouded history of Nitocris. And was the last pharaoh of the 6th dynasty a woman? For we looked at, recently I did a video about the earliest dynasties and the collapse. And now that they figured out that the cause of the first interim period, and actually the collapse of the earliest dynasties that were kicking ass so hard, was apparently helped out greatly by a volcano, which it and its effect and drought along with it in the area ruined everything. And they got cores from Kilimanjaro and stuff like this, and proved that it had happened. But she's supposed to be, so this is kind of tying some things together too, because I don't want to do one on all of these pharaohs, but Diodorus and many others talked about it here, and it almost seems like they're parodying each other, of course, like a lot of Greeks. So it's like, well, who was the first one to say this? But Diodorus told you there was over 400 of kings that were Egyptians, 5 of which were females. And so whenever they go into this 3 of females, it's kind of strange, because we know of 5, it really became 6, and now it's been 7. But then we have to figure in the Ptolemaic dynasties and Cleopatra and Arsinoe and so on. So then it gets up to even more. But at this time, pre-BC, what it would have been like, and so on, like that, right? Well, through the time of Diodorus is one thing. Talking about the earliest of dynasties, over 2,000 years before that, is another. Now, Nitocris is claimed by some sources to have been a female pharaoh of ancient Egypt. However, prior to the Ptolemaic dynasty, there were few female rulers in the history of ancient Egypt. Many of these women ruled only as regents for their underage sons, as I had talked about. Most famous of these early female rulers is arguably Hatshepsut, a pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, although she officially ruled jointly with her nephew and stepson, Thutmose III, who was still a child when he ascended to the throne, Hatshepsut assumed the title of Pharaoh several years into her reign. Despite efforts by her successors to completely erase her from history, there are enough artifacts from her reign to attest to her existence and status. In fact, there's a temple that's built by her. Her cartouches are quite a few places, although in other places they are marked out, like it didn't want it to be known somehow. But you see that Machiavellian attitude going through a lot of ancient Egypt and stuff. Like, if somebody compares you to this great guy, then all of a sudden he goes, go out and smack all of his stuff up. So they'll quit saying that. It almost seems like it's something as simplistic as that. But Hatshepsut has been found, and they say, well, here's a statue of her, and you go, well, that's not her because she's got a beard on. Well, they make a mention of her actually wearing the beard and going through the ceremonies and things that a king was going to have to do. And people nowadays, of course, in feminism and stuff, they'd freak out on this idea. But who would want to ruin everything and be the one that ruined everything? Some people want to be the people that do that, and you can see that nowadays and stuff, but who would not want to be the one to carry it on? And so in some special way, it's always done this way, and she goes, well, I'm going to do it that way. And some people talk back and forth about how she almost had arguments with a priest where they were like, don't do that, or things like this and stuff. But she would meet people and greet people as such. But of course, the Pharaoh didn't greet everybody that came to come visit. They got to talk to a lot of other people, but not everybody gets to go even see any king necessarily. It's not just a big meat fest. So unlike Hatshepsut, Nitocris is a much more mysterious, unknown somewhat figure. Apart from being mentioned by Herodotus and Manetho, there's little else at present that points towards her existence. And we look at a picture here, and this picture, to me, and I don't know what you think, let me know down in the comments here, see if I can get that, there we go. To me, looks like King Tut's mask on the left, looks like Nefertiti in the middle, and looks like Ramses' wife from her tomb. There's a tomb that I did a walkthrough through, and it looks exactly like that. And it's got the bird on her head and so on. One of those. And so that would have been who it is, it looks like, and everything here. But yet, what you find is these are the ancient pharaohs of ancient Egypt. And so that's not King Tut necessarily. And a lot of people have said King Tut's mask, the face in it, has just been made for it, and the whole headdress is for someone else. Well, was it for a queen? They have Queen Ty and everything going on then, and Akhenaten and all the stuff goes on before that time too. So I mean, what comes out of all that? And I've done a recent video about Akhenaten's parents and grandparents, Ty, Thea, Tuya, and Yuya, which are the great-grandparents of King Tut, grandparents of Ty. So who she would have been, where they're both blondes. We've talked a lot about blonde-haired, blue-eyed Egyptians here recently, and the earliest of dynasties and showing up too, so you can bet that she was along in this. In fact, the very first of dynasties. I'm fixing to do what Diodorus and Herodotus and so said on the Egyptians, each one, and we'll look in Diodorus and how he claims at a time before when there were gods that ran Egypt and so on. And then it came down to these people, and they had run it for over 1,000 years, and all in direct descendants and related to each other, and then it gets messed up. So it looks like it would have been the second interim period before they seemed to think that it even outstepped each other. But that's just in one statement he makes out of a lot of them. The debated last pharaoh of the 6th dynasty. Nitocris is believed to have lived around the 22nd century BC, which towards the end of the 6th dynasty. Most have suggested that Nitocris was the last pharaoh of this dynasty. On the fragment of the Turin Kings list, known as the Turin Papyrus and the Turin Royal Canon, there is an unknown pharaoh by the name of Neferti, who is the successor of Nemtisaf II, and it has been speculated that this is Nitocris by conflagration of the name into a Greek type form. And what's strange is whenever you look at the story, they tell you that there's a Babylonian queen that's famous of this same name, Nitocris. And it's kind of an uncommon name, Nito, in the first place, Nito. But Chris goes along with christened and Christos and things along that line, so it doesn't seem like it fits so well. But let's get into this further a little bit. Missed a picture. Archaeologists identify a temple of Hatshepsut, the female pharaoh the ancients tried to erase. Yeah, we'll probably do that one too then. It adds to the flavor of this, right? Pharaoh Akhenaten, a different view of the heretic king. I think that's even an old one, but it may not be. But they've done that 3 or 4 times. We even did one recently where they said that he was gay and a cricket. So people come up with all kinds of crazy things. By comparison, the Abydos Kings list, known as the Abydos table, has Netjakara occupying the position of Neferti, and it has been argued that the same as Netjakara is the male name. It is not possible that Neferti and Nitocris were one and the same person. So in other words, it's showing male and not even a female's name and nomenclature that they took it from, or from either list. So that doesn't look like it could actually be the same situation, right? One thought of it. Oh, so here's the cartouche of Merenre, Nemitasef II on the Abydos Kings list. On the right, the cartouche of Netjakara from the Abydos Kings list, right? So totally different, and they can tell from the symbolism. It's not just like, oh, well, they made it male because of so and so, that it doesn't seem to fit necessarily. Let's continue. The Turin Kings list may have been written as early as the reign of Ramses II, which was famous and we all know about him, or as late as the end of the 20th dynasty, though. As for the Abydos Kings list, it was discovered on a wall of the mortuary temple of Seti I, and was almost certainly written during Seti's reign, of course. Neither of these sources name Nitocris explicitly, and the only known source regarding Nitocris, which was written by an ancient Egyptian, is Manetho's Egyptica, or the History of Egypt. And so we look at this, and this is a Turin's list piece that they show you and what they actually have of it. And so it's nowhere near complete. And this is why they don't really like to use this list or that list, and they've compiled the one that they have, because kind of like, I don't know, old cracked up tablets, you have to put it together like a puzzle. And since they never found any more pieces of this puzzle that's worth trying to glean information out of, they have to go off other people's list and go, well, at least this is here and this is here and this lines up, so what can I get from this that'll add to what we already have or clarify what we already have. So Manetho, writing about Nitocris. Manetho was an Egyptian historian and priest who lived around the 3rd century BC during the reign of the Ptolemaic dynasty. But he's still believed to be, of course, an Egyptian, not necessarily a Greek or going into Romans later. Compared to the Egyptians who made the Turin's Kings list and Abydos Kings list, Manetho may be said to be separated from Nitocris by a much larger span of time. Therefore, it's possible that Manetho's writings regarding Nitocris are less accurate than we desire. For instance, in the Egyptica from Armenian version of Eusebius, Manetho wrote that there was a queen, Nitocris, the noblest and loveliest of the women of her time. She had a fair complexion and is said to have built the 3rd pyramid. Now, one second. That's kind of strange because we know that goes with Minkare, right? Well, a minute ago we had a name with a Kare on it too, and people have tried to put that together and say, well, that's Minkare. Well, is that Nitocris? Well, it can be because she's in the end of the 6th dynasty, and apparently that tomb was built before then. And Minkare is this other guy. And so it's possible the Egyptians are messing something up here. But others give, and more fragments are found. And in another fragment of Egyptica from George Sincelius by Byzantine chroniclers, the number of years that Nitocris reigned is also given. It says, Nitocris, the noblest and loveliest of women at her time, of fair complexion, the builder of the 3rd pyramid, reigned for 12 years. And so this would be like perhaps she finished off somebody's reign, and then due to some type of circumstances, her child that was a male to take on the heir was either killed, something happened, he died of disease, something went on, or she did not have a valid heir, and so it passed on to another set of people. No pun intended by saying set. So, fair of complexion. Other people have said that that would actually indicate for her hair color, perhaps, too, and things. And now we've looked at all those blue-eyed ones and everything, and that how fair was she? Because we've talked about what fairies really entail. And so here's a portion of a scroll here that's Papyrus Badin, and it's the 5th century AD, suspected partial copy of the epitome based on the Egyptica of Manetho, because it contains part of the script that's where they're talking about it. And a lot of times you can tell these Greek historians, they're actually going off what somebody else says. And in fact, there are stories that get passed down, and they were like, well, so and so said, and it goes 3 or 4 down below. But they kind of want to let you know that, as per what this guy said, and apparently everybody's going with it, and in that light, you kind of can tell that they maybe don't necessarily totally agree, right? And in nowadays, in most of those situations where this hearsay is involved, we know that we don't agree whatsoever. We know this is hearsay, and it almost looks like the people were playing with him, telling him such things as giant rats, big as giant ants, big as dogs, are digging out gold, or what seems like a telling of an elephant in North Africa there, where they say that their cows are much bigger, the hides thick twice as much, their horns are so big though they've got to walk backwards to graze, because if they go forward the little horns stick in the ground and they can't even graze, which just makes a foolish nonsense. But then you look at the ideal, and but you think he's got to know about elephants. I mean, so even if hearing the bullshit description, he wouldn't be like, duh. Or is he really coming out and going, well, these guys tried to make a fool of me? Well, he doesn't say those words or anything that leads to that, so it leads to believe the guy didn't know what the hell an elephant was, or is that even the story? Let's continue here. Although Manetho recorded that the 3rd pyramid was built by Nitocris, it has been established that this monument was built by Minkara. We call it the Minkara Pyramid. It is the finishing of Orion's belt of stars. It's the one that's a little off, a little smaller, a little offset, the 3rd one. He's a pharaoh, though, from the 4th dynasty. Some have speculated that Manetho had misread Minkara for Minkara. That's a mistake right there. Hence the mistake. Well, that's a mistake right there. If you'll look, he's got Minkara for Minkara. I don't see a difference whatsoever in that by even a letter. I think one of those was Minkare, and the other one is Minkara. and so close names, and they're trying to say, well, it's a mistake in there, but why are they so pinning it on the late 6th dynasty and at the fall, and then that's why that happened, kind of? And are they trying to say, well, then a woman got it and da da da, and it fell apart? Is this the thing? Or because that was in the 4th dynasty and this is the 6th, so it's an offset by quite a bit. So anyhow, this speculation also suggests that Minkara could have been Nitocris's prenomen or throne name, and so it's not Minkara that could have been her throne name. It's the other one that I said right there, Minkare, spelled differently. But could this be a case of transposing that situation? Well, another way of looking at it too is the guy Minkara himself that we know of, was he actually just was he a woman, and that Minkara is just Nitocris's prenomen or throne name, and that her real name was Nitocris, and that they found that identified by a cartouche surrounding it and the sedge and the bee. This prenomen does appear in the Abydos Kings list, though after Nedjetkara, the other prenomen thought to belong to Nitocris. So it's like, no, it seems like it's after that. So, okay, let's look into this farther. Because here's Minkare, and he's wearing the white crown here, and see if I can get that off of that. You can tell his Caucasian looks, but he's very stylized, and he's doing that one step forward situation, but there he is in all his glory. A little bit of a wide beard there for him, but meh, back in the older times they had that. Not that they had set it all the way at the Sumerian width, if you will, but look at the ripples in it and so on, and it has that little concept that goes with it. A lot of people look at this stuff and they just brush on past it, but this is a stone that is so tough that to think about today, carving it out with the eyes and the way that they are, with using just chisels, even if you could use super hardened steel chisels, would be an incredible endeavor. Yet at this time, they didn't even have hardened bronze. Supposedly. Although there is this early meteorite iron that we talked about that shows up, and some other findings that really punch back the Iron Age into a totally different time, and that's kind of weird and very telling and different, because these are some of the ages of man. And when you get about 1800 years differential on running, whenever you're going to start considering there to be a partial Iron Age, it makes a radical difference in a lot of thoughts. When you think 2,000 years, well, look what we've done in 2,000 years since AD, if you will. Oh, it's been amazing. Well, we didn't really get that puppy up and going until about 1,500 years after that, and finding America and the Industrial Revolution and the UK, Europe, and in America, and drove it up all of a sudden. But you look at what happened during your grandfather's time up until now, and we've turned into space, man. It's incredible. I wish we'd just take it to the next level, though. But you can tell this guy here ain't got no boobs. And there are pictures of a ship set that has boobs, and shows her even in a feminine guise wearing the beard, though. And it even has the little straps that go up around the helmet thing, showing you that he didn't really wear a beard normally. And it's believed that they didn't grow out the beard normally, they wore it ceremoniously. So here's another depiction showing you that, well, they had to have facial hair and things, and another Caucasian trait. But that's the Greywacke statue of Minkare. So, So apart from that, it seems like nothing more that was written by Manetho regarding Nitocris. Thus, even if Manetho was a reliable source regarding Nitocris, there was what we can find out about Nitocris from him. So how about Herodotus on Nitocris? Well, by far the most colorful account of Nitocris comes from the Greek Herodotus uh, Herodotus, the historian. Herodian. Yeah, it kind of works. And colorful stories do come from him, for he has a lot of hearsay, as we talked about. Like many of the other fanciful stories found in Herodotus' work, this one, too, ought to be taken with a pinch of salt. Despite the historians' claim that this tale was related to him by the Egyptian priests themselves, the story of Nitocris and Herodotus' the histories goes like this. The name of the queen was Nitocris, the same as that of the Babylonian queen. See, there's that mention. And at this time it would have been called Babylonian, but if this was talking about the same time of the 4th century, then this would have been Sumerian, still at this time. They said that she avenged her brother. Despite the fact that he was their king, the Egyptians killed him and then handed the kingdom over to her. But in order to avenge him, she killed a lot of them by a trick. What she did, and here we go, guys, was construct a massive underground chamber, and although in reality she had other plans, she claimed to want to hold an inauguration ceremony for it. Some people have thought that this is the pit of El Arion, which, if you look, is, well, it's Aryan, but it's covered up all with sand. It was actually used in a couple of movies and everything. It also has this perfect shown bathtub type thing that's into it, and a real deep dug pit. But this is another one of those unfinished pyramids I talk about a lot of times, where all the pyramid top and all the stones were probably taken to use in the Great Pyramids, because there's no way they could have made all those stones unless they were stealing them from everywhere, speeding up the process quite a bit. So this trick that she had, what she did was construct a massive underground chamber, and although in reality she had other plans, she claimed to want to hold an inauguration ceremony for it. She invited the Egyptians she knew to have been the ringleaders in her brother's murder, and there were quite a few of them. To that reception, while they were in the middle of the meal, she had the river flood in on them through a large secret passage. This is all the information I was given about Nitocris, except that afterwards she threw herself into a chamber full of ashes to avoid retribution. So she threw herself into the fire and stuff. Out of that, you can get a twisted story to where maybe this whole overthrowing thing, and it involved a lady, and then they overthrew the lady and threw her in the ashes and went on. A hint, hint, a ding. But there's quite a strangeness to this story, and you say, well, they've got this what they called a colorful story, and this seems far-fetched and out of knot. And then again, that pyramid of El Arion doesn't appear to anybody to have any Nile running inlet that actually comes all the way to it, but comes close. And of course, that's how they ran it off of it, was running little jetties that run down through there, canal works or whatever, that help to carry it to areas, to pyramids, to places like that. And they found enough of those to say, okay, well, they dig out this place, all except for where it connects to the Nile, and then somebody bust it through, and then there you go. Just like they did help to make the river and so on, like that. But then she kills herself in a chamber full of ashes, or a room full of ashes. So what is that all about? To avoid retribution. Kind of a strange story, and it seems like it has this, I don't know, Greek flair to it, doesn't it? A little bit. The story of Nitocris remains wrapped in myths and legends. Did she really have the role of a 6th dynasty pharaoh? If so, under what praenomen? And why was she erased? And so that's the end of it here, guys. So what do you think? I mean, do you think Menkaure was actually a woman? I mean, it doesn't look like a woman, but then instead of doing the thing they've done every other time, they'd have to be covering it up quite a bit, but they're not covering that up in any way, shape, or form. Looks to me, and then we're talking about somebody who is so different in ages from the fourth dynasty where that was built. And so it's possible now, if you just leave out one little sentence, and of course people could make up all kinds of things off of it here. Let's say we leave one little sentence out. What sentence are we going to leave out? Well, we're going to leave out when we talk about her having built the third pyramid, that it's not that, but it's the, check this little insert here, it's one of those little pyramids in front of dot 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 the third pyramid. Something like that simple could be left out, and then everything falls into place pretty much, and she ends up just being the wife of the failed ruler at the end of the sixth dynasty that takes it to the seventh and the changeover. Right? Am I wrong? Well, I'm wrong. They get to this Nitocris type thing. Okay, so then Nitocris would have to be Nitocris. But then Nitocris is the same name as Netjakara, and that's a male name. Oh, so even on the wall, it's a male name, even whenever they're using the other name for him. Damn. That's why this goes around in a circle, people. But it was reported by a bunch of people. Yeah, well, that one hearsay got repeated by a bunch of people. But so they go off on the fact that there was at least 3 of them. Where we're going to find whenever we go into the tales of these different people and Diodorus and stuff, that there were 6. No, actually there's 7. And then there's the Cleopatra and things that we knew about too. So there had been a few. And while some of them did take over in the interim part, that's in no way saying that they didn't run Egypt as the Pharaoh of Egypt. Seemed like the queens there had a little bit of play in what went on. And of course, being the wife to their husband as today, very much involved quite often. You can imagine one that could be standoffish with her kids and kept separate and in the palace, if you will. But you can also imagine one that would want to become part of everything. For women kind of like that. Let's just say it straightforward. So, boom. So what do you think here? I'm Jepset, Nefertiti, these ones that we know about. Well, in the Manethos, we're going to find out that they're already preemptive to this time right here had been one that had taken that slot and they knew about it. So is he actually confusing all of these? And if he is, the priest he's talking to isn't really a priest, but somebody who ain't got it quite figured out, but heard of it once. Or what? And why does he make the connection to saying it's that same Babylonian queen name? Or is it the same person he's trying to say? Is it Semiramis? Is it that same person over here, and then it looks like, so Semiramis' brother? Or some Babylonian queen's brother was the king of Egypt, the Pharaoh of the time? Is that what they're indicating? Because again, these guys say there's over 400 that are Egyptians, 4 were Ethiopians, but they make note that they were in scattered little times, and if you add them all together, it adds up to 36 years. But then also Ethiopians, spelled Aethiopian, Ethiopians, didn't mean the people that are currently an admixed people that live in Ethiopia today, for that was called Abyssinia until recently and stuff. And you can look at Herodotus' map even during this time, and these people were talking about, and they show brown blotches of everywhere they've called people Ethiopians, and in doing so, they look like they're talking about all these farmers around everywhere. Yeah, and on their vase work and things, it shows them too to be somewhat pale. Her description here is, of course, pale also, and it says that she is fair and pale, and all of these things about it that they're going with. But the only thing is they can't find the exact person that this is. And I think the problem there is in the naming of Nitocris, and in the fact that her name probably was not that in any way, shape, or form, but that's an Egyptianized or a Greekized name of the Egyptian form of perhaps not even her throne name if there was one. But when they look at these other people, and I've talked to a guy that, I didn't talk to him, I watched a dissertation of to this guy that runs through this moment here, and he talks about, well, these people and they had kids and this, that, and the other, so she can't be the male in that person. She has to have been the female. And there's a couple of people that could have been right there in the 6th dynasty at the end of it, if not the one at the end where things falter. And her kid either is not of age and someone else takes over, or it shifts again, for that's a time whenever turmoil happens again, as we talked about before. Like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy, and we'll go on to another tale. And let me know if you want me to go through that Diodorus's telling of it here, because it'll run through a couple of 3 probably here, just going through his pages on it, maybe farther. It's got quite a few pages to it, and if I do it and don't shut up, it's going to get thick and long. Peace.